My favorite. Some stories I've heard is that I'm a premature baby and I was born close to 8 months.
Hey, what's going on, friends? This is Louis. I am here to read a story. This story was emailed to me by Melinda Anderson from Minneapolis. She heard of the project by a friend and she encouraged us to share her story. Now, we were unable to actually get together and film her or even record her audio to share the story. So, she decided to write it. So here I am. I'm going to be sharing her story. And first, I want to say thank you so much, Melinda, for taking time and actually writing down what you experience in life. I read your story, and this is phenomenal, it's remarkable, and what a miracle you are. And to have the view of life that you have, it really speaks volume of the character that you've developed through the years. So I'm certain that people, as they hear the story, they will be moved because what you've experienced in life could have made anybody else turned a completely different way. So I'm blessed to have this opportunity. All right, so let's go. And forgive me, I'm going to be reading down. I'm not an expert at this, so I'm going to do my best to kind of look up every now and then. Oh, and additionally, you're going to see some pictures floating, in the video as I'm sharing the story. Those pictures are of Melinda. That way you can have an idea of what she looks like. Okay, so let's go. I titled this A Very Special Late Beginning because normally a child's life with their mother begins at conception. Soon as the mother is able to see, hear, and feel the new little life touching her body, this is the real beginning. The relationship of bonding and love for that child that just arrived into the world now begins. The relationship with my mother did not begin until 20 years later. During my childhood, if a woman was pregnant and not married, plus being pregnant with a man of a different race than hers, that was a real issue. And I guess America, we can remember these times, all right? Back in the mid-1900s, if the mother's parents would not accept the situation, the birth mother was coerced into giving the baby up at birth to the county welfare department for foster home placement or to an adoption agency. Now, this describes my situation. Now, this is where the story gets interesting. My mother was white and my father was black. When my mother became pregnant with me, she lived in a home for unwed mothers to babysit and do housework until I was born. When my mother gave birth to me, she did not get to see me, touch, love, or bond with me at all. She was told by hospital staff, just give her any name, we just need something to write on the birth certificate. The name will be changed anyway when she gets adopted. The day I was taken away from my mother legally was in court on her birthday. All my mother saw was a big bundle wrapped in a pretty soft yellow blanket, still not having any idea at all what I looked like. My mother had to sign documentation stating she will never try to locate me. I grew up in different foster homes and was considered as a ward of the state until I was 18 years old. So on October 1948 in St. Paul, Minneapolis, I was born with light colored skin complexion. So for a while, it was difficult to be accurate about my race. The county welfare department placed me in 3 different white family homes for the first 3 years of my life. It was the mother of the third white family home that told the county welfare department social worker, this baby's colored, not white, she needs to be placed in a different home. Bye. Imagine that. Woo! Finally, I was placed in a home of a black family and remained with black families until the age of 18. On November 1954, I was placed in a great family home, Lewis and Alma White. This family had 1 child of their own, along with a set of twin boys and another daughter they adopted. These people truly loved me as if I was their own child. All of us children were treated and loved equally. A year later, when I was 8 years old, I was removed from the White family home because another family wanted to adopt me. When I left the White's home, they were so heartbroken that they decided to become my godparents, so they would be able to have contact with me. They were my godparents, grandparents, parents, and everything wonderful to me. We all did stay in contact until the very end. My godmother passed away while I was in Germany serving the U.S. Army, and my godfather passed away after I got out of the service. The Stokes family wanted to adopt me. This is a new family, by the way. They already had two biological sons of their own, but wanted a little girl, me. They even had me using their last name. A few years later, Mr. and Mrs. Stokes were involved in a horrible automobile accident very close to home on Highway 61 on Burns Avenue in St. Paul, Minneapolis. I refer to this as the intersection that changed my life forever. This accident caused Mrs. Stokes great injuries that affected her mentally and emotional abilities, which resulted in not being able to adopt me. One nice spring day, a county welfare department social worker picked me up at school. Immediately after entering her vehicle, she said to me, "Melinda, you will need to use your birth last name now since you will no longer be adopted. Your last name from now on will be Sidler." She took me to another foster home. I was age 10. I remained in this home until I was 18 years old. This was a real nice foster home. Their names were Lawrence and Elizabeth Tarver. They were a bit elderly and had 5 other foster children, but we were all well cared for. We were always neat and clean, had great balance and home-cooked meals and a clean home. I handled many adult responsibilities at the very young age of 12. I did much of shopping for the other children's school supplies, clothing, and grocery shopping, but I enjoyed all of this and felt so honored and privileged to be trusted. Soon as I became 18 years old, the county welfare department was very anxious to get me out of the system, wanting me to become totally self-sufficient. I had just graduated from high school in June. I am wondering how to make this suddenly happen. I had no financial means to be able to live on my own, so I decided to go into the Army. I began this process but did not pass the written exam. November of the same year, the county welfare department did remove me from their system, but the foster parents were kind enough to allow me to remain in their home at their expense. Shortly after I graduated from high school, my foster mother became terminally ill. She wanted me to accompany her to the doctor because she was afraid of what the news would be. The doctor ran some tests and she was diagnosed with a terminal cancer. Soon after arriving home from the doctor visit, she asked me to call a close friend, Catherine Scipio, asking her to come to her house for an important conversation. Mrs. Scipio arrived about 30 minutes later. It was Mrs. Scipio, my foster mother, and me sitting together. She said, "Catherine, I am quite ill and won't be around much longer. I know that Melinda is 18 years old, but I'm asking that you keep watch over her until she's grown up. She still is too young to be completely on her own." Mrs. Scipio agreed to this. Now, this is amazing how selfless human beings can be. That's why I love people. This gets better. Soon, my foster mother went into Midway Hospital in St. Paul, Minneapolis, in January and passed within a few days. I moved into my own studio apartment, which was within the same building as Mrs. Scipio. I was only working a part-time job, earning almost minimum wages, but I managed. This apartment included the basic furniture. I had to buy my own bed linens, towels, washcloth, bathroom accessories, dishes, cookware, and everything else to maintain my home. I was able to buy a small item each week, but it all added up quickly to becoming a nice, comfortable home. In fact, while living in the Stokes family, this was very close to Mrs. Scipio's home. I already knew the Scipio family and Kathy. Mrs. Scipio kept a very close eye on me for a long time. I ended up in referring her as Mom too. We stayed in close touch until her passing a few years ago. Mom Scipio would mention to me from time to time, "You should try finding your real mother." But I was totally against this. I said, "She gave me up, so why would I need to bother trying to find her? She didn't want me, so why?" All of a sudden, while waiting to go to a special dinner for a friend, Carol, in Minneapolis, I looked at my birth certificate. I saw that my mother was actually in St. Paul, Minneapolis, and with the last name of Sidler. Beginning such an uncommon name, I looked in the St. Paul's telephone directory. I saw 3 people with this last name. I did the mini, mo underline Donald Sidler, who coincidentally was her brother, and gave him a call. I said, "Hello, sir. My name is Melinda Sidler, and I am wondering if you have any relation to Laura Sidler. He said, yes, she's my sister. Her name is Laura Copeland. She lives in Plymouth, Minneapolis, and proceeded to give me her telephone number. I was quite stunned and shocked. I thought this guy was just too fast in giving me this information. How does he really know who I am? After a few minutes, I called my mother. She answered the phone. I said, is this Laura Copeland? She said, yes. Who's this? I said, oh boy, you better sit down because when you find out, you are really going to be quite surprised. This is your daughter, Melinda. She said, oh, for heaven's sake. At this time, I bet we both were in total shock. I talked a bit. She said, can I call you back tomorrow when we can talk more? I said, you sure can. I will be gone, but we'll be home by 5 or 6 p.m. She said, okay, I will call you tomorrow after 6 p.m. It gets even better. Tomorrow came. I waited and waited, but my phone never rang. I thought, oh boy, I guess my mother wants no more to do with me. I shed a few tears and went to bed feeling pretty sad. The following Tuesday, a letter dated January 19, 1975 arrived from my mother. This letter read, I'm still in a state of shock after your phone call yesterday. It is more difficult than I thought it would be. I am still unable to tell anyone, so I haven't been able to phone you. Okay, for over 26 years, as far as I know, my mother and myself were the only ones that ever knew about my birth, about me giving birth to you. My brother, Don, I guess he gave you my phone number, never knew. I have no idea what you told him, as he practically is non-existent as far as our relationship is concerned, and I rarely, if ever, talk to him. You said you wanted to know about your parents. Your father died some years ago of tuberculosis. His name was James Andy Anderson, who ran off to California the minute he learned of my pregnancy. The welfare put me in a home to do housework and babysit for my board and room until you were born. I was young and afraid, and so on my birthday, coincidence, they took you away from me, December 10th, and I had never even seen you. My parents did not then, nor did they never or ever accept an interracial relationship. So I have never been accepted by my family. My hand is shaking so that I can hardly write, but I wonder if you were never adopted, why they lied and said to you would have, sorry, let me read that again. My hand is shaking so that I can hardly write, but I wonder if you were never adopted, why they lied and said you would have the love and care of two parents and that I was doing what was best for you. I don't know what to do. I am afraid to tell my husband. He will never understand why I never mentioned this in the 20 years we've been married. I will try to call you, but when I have a chance, it's when you are working. Maybe you could call me on Tuesday through Saturday before 3 p.m. That's when he's at work as a rule. And he is off on Sundays and Mondays. I keep wondering if it's right for you to meet me after all this time. And you could very well hate me or have reasons not to like me very much. I have really been thinking about it and wondering and worrying. I don't even know how to sign this letter. With love, Laura Copeland. So this was a letter her mom wrote her. My mother called me on Tuesday, January 23rd, 1975. We were on the phone for over 2 hours. I could sense that my mother was very nervous and hyper person. My mother was surprised to know that I still kept the same name she gave me at birth, Melinda Joyce. My mother told me about how no one other than her mother, including her present husband and children, know nothing about me, and she is trying to figure out how and when to tell them. I said, oh, I understand. When the timing is right, only you will know, and then you will tell your husband and children. On Saturday, January 25th, 1975, my mother and younger sister, Jolene, came to my house. My mother immediately said, you sure look a lot like your father. She told me my father's side of the family and mentioned me having a sister on his side named Penny. She said her husband, John, works with Penny's husband at the U.S. Post Office. My mother contacted Penny via phone. A week later, Penny, her husband, and youngest daughter came to my house. I asked Penny's husband, "Do you think Penny and I look anything alike?" He shook his head and said, "Oh yeah, I can see the resemblance." A second letter dated January 27, 1975 arrived. The letter stated she was worried about me getting home safely from her house on January 25th. The same letter stated she was worried about me being happy, lonely, and being strong. This visit went okay, but I think we both were still in shock and nervous. During this visit, I met my sister Pam. On February 1975, I sent my mother a Valentine card. She called to thank me for the lovely Valentines. Her husband was close by when she called. She put him on the phone. He immediately said, "I sure would love to meet you. Why don't you come on over, spend the night, and we could all have a great breakfast in the morning." I said, "I am not familiar with Plymouth, Minneapolis, and might end up getting lost." He said, "Okay. How about coming out on Sunday afternoon? We can meet and we will have a real nice dinner." I agreed. So on Sunday, February 16th, 1975, I went to Mom's house. I met her husband and we immediately hit it off perfectly. We had a great dinner. Shortly after this, I met my brothers Richard and David. Finally, approximately 27 years later, I was part of my mother's family. We had many great meals and would celebrate birthdays, holidays, and just other family fun days. It was great not having to sneak around to see or call my mother anymore. Unfortunately, my mother passed away on November 1977. I only had my mother for a short time, but we became very close. So my friends, I know I'm not trying to preach, but if you have your mothers near you, or parents or family, you never know when they're gonna go away, so cherish every moment. Now, earlier I mentioned that I tried to join the U.S. Army, but failed the entrance exam. Well, I finally ended up going into the U.S. Army in February 1979 and was honorably discharged in February 1983. I had the following MOS skills. I was a 64 Charlie light vehicle driver. While stationed at Aberdeen Proving Grounds in Maryland, I drove high-ranking officers, lieutenant colonels, and even 4-star generals. I had various courier runs each day for a few months. I also worked as a 71 Lima as an administrative capacity in personnel. While serving in Germany from 1981 and 1982, I worked as a 71 Lima in many capacities. I was in charge of in-processing all troops, officer enlisted, before releasing them to their prospective duty station. When I was discharged, I achieved the rank of E5 or sergeant, and I also received the Army Commendation Medal. I enjoyed the military. I learned beginning during my basic training how important teamwork truly is, and I still believe that today. While serving, especially in Germany, I learned to truly appreciate a lot of the things we take for granted. For example, is when we make phone calls, we have to pay right away, and when the money runs out, there is no more signal and the call terminates. So she appreciates this. We don't longer worry about this of using calling cards. I remember calling cards. I have a wonderful friend that has a great and very accurate saying. Just remember, there's always something good about anything. I sometimes think about the fact that if I would have been adopted, how I would have turned out. But the fact that I never was adopted, one great thing about this is that I will not know the many great people that I know today. Many of these people have and still are a great influence in my life and have helped me through some rough moments, and I am thankful and grateful to these people each and every day. I know many children in my situation never find their mother, but I did, and I am so glad. But if it were not for Mom's CPO, I probably never would have had I probably never would have, so a huge thanks to her. May she continue to rest in peace. If it weren't for the great encouragement and support of Pipi Ardenia, I would not be writing this story, so a huge thanks to Pipi. Pipi also arranged and convinced me to send this story to Mr. Luis Feliz. Thank you, Pipi. It's a beautiful story. I began to be very independent and self-sufficient at an early age. I have always been able to make it on my own, even during periods of unemployment. Many children live an entire life and never find their mothers or any of their family. Also, children in my situation remain psychologically and emotionally scarred for life and end up making poor life decisions where they end up in prison and or homeless. Through my great guidance from my last two sets of foster parents, my wonderful godparents, along with my strength, faith, and self-determination, I resulted in a life that allowed me to become self-sufficient at an early age. I have always had gainful employment and was able to budget my money very well. I have no type of criminal or emotional problems. I can say with full honesty, I turned out to be quite a strong woman. And that, my friends, is the story of Melinda Anderson. And I hope that you've enjoyed it. If you're in the foster system, hopefully you can relate with this story. And I want to say thank you for all of you who took the time to listen to the story. And Melinda, again, thank you so much. And God bless you all.